Hey guys, my name is Emma and today I'm going to be talking about the act of rereading. So this is part one of a three-part series I'm going to be doing on this channel about the whole act of rereading, why you would want to reread a book, and just sort of talking about some of my favourite rereads and things like that. This one today is going to be really just a discussion piece where I'm going to be talking about all things rereading, pros and cons, and then I'm going to release a video in a few days time which is my favourite books to reread and ones that I have probably reread the most in my life. And then the final one, part 3, is going to be a list of books that I've only read once but I know I'm going to reread again at some point in the future, and I actively can't wait to get to that point where I feel like I can reread them again. I've actually already filmed that one. I have not edited it yet, but I have filmed it because who cares about doing things in order. So today I'm going to be talking about the process of rereading and its value within the act of reading itself. So, I don't know about you, but I really love to reread books, and one of the things that got me thinking about this recently was having a discussion with my dad a while ago because he actively doesn't reread books. And I wanted to chat, to have some musings about the process of rereading itself and how it changes our interaction with the book and with the story, and just whether it's a valid use of our time as a reader. It's no secret that pretty much everybody on BookTube has a TBR pile that is probably at least as tall as them, and I don't know about you, but I've got at least 100 books on my list that I want to get to at some point. You know, is it really a good use of our time to reread a book that we have already experienced when there's just such a huge range of literature out there available for us? I'm not really pushing any particular viewpoint. There isn't like a grandiose argument going on in here. I'm just kind of chatting and spouting some words. So I did a little bit of googling and a little bit of reading of some articles out there about the benefits of rereading, why you might do it, why you might not, all these kind of things. And we're just going to kind of talk through it. So there are various benefits to rereading books which stem mainly from the idea of the more you're exposed to something, the better you'll be able to understand it. I personally am a very, very quick reader, and it means that I quite often skim read books. I know this is something that I am guilty of, is skimming through them. So I find personally that on second time round I pick up on things in the story that I totally missed first time round, whether it be more details about the setting or nuances about the character or little plot twists and things that I didn't pick up first time round that one coming back to become a bit more apparent. I just want to point out that I'm talking about this for fiction only, not non-fiction. The benefits of reading non-fiction very much do come down to comprehension, because the more that you reread something when it comes to non-fiction and learning facts, the more likely you are to be able to retain them and potentially make linkings. I'm looking specifically at fiction, and now there's still a lot of weight and emphasis behind the idea that by rereading a book you are going to get more out of it second time round, but I don't think it comes down to that as much. And it's worth mentioning that comprehension is only improved if you are actively intending to try and improve that. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that just kind of rote learning, rolling through them, does not necessarily mean that you are going to have a greater understanding of that thing that you are experiencing. You know, repetition does not equal mastery. It just means that you've done that a few more times. Another reason why I think it's really important to reread, and one of the benefits from it, is fitting that work in the canon of literature as a whole and the historical and social context. So there are so many books that when first time around, if you are new to that genre or that time period or anything that's going on in that sort of area, if it's the first book that you've read within that kind of bubble, you're not going to have a full appreciation of where it fits with everything, and there will be references that you potentially won't be getting, whereas coming back to it afterwards is definitely going to help you to slot it into the wider canon of where it exists in relation to what has come before and what has gone after and all those kind of things. I mean, a classic example of that is I've been reading a bit more YA recently. I don't feel like I can confidently say whether the book is a technically good book, because I've not read enough YA to know what are the good features. What are the features of a good book within that genre? I'd say the same thing for poetry. I've recently just started reading some poetry, which I've not done since, you know, doing it for my GCSEs or A-levels. And I don't feel like I can say if a poem is technically good or not. I can only say whether I've enjoyed it. And there are so many books that when you first go into that kind of a genre, you read it and you love it and you think it's brilliant, because you don't know that this is actually potentially a tired trope that is not a very good example of that trope within this genre, because you've not experienced that up to that point. I find this very much in crime. If you read a lot of crime books and a lot of thrillers, what was a shocking twist like at the beginning of your reading journey, 2 years down the line, having read a lot of that genre, you're not going to get the same enjoyment from it because you've seen it before, you know what's coming. So in terms of getting a better understanding of a book and getting a better understanding of your own reading taste, I think rereading books is really, really interesting to do after getting a better experience of that world. I've just read a bunch of modern classics like 1984 and Brave New World and things like that, and I have read a fair amount of dystopian fiction in general that uses this as a jumping off point. And actually, now that I've read those two classics, I really want to go and reread some of those dystopian fictions to see where the references are, to see what they're taking as inspiration. And another good example of this is actually the book We by Zamyatin is the direct inspiration for both 1984 and We. And when my dad was talking to me about this, he read 1984 and Brave New World first and then read We, but he wanted me to do it the other direction to see what your experience as a reader is like coming in it from the two different directions. So whether by reading the kind of jumping off points you can see those linkings back, or whether actually it's better to read the original because you value it potentially a bit more and then you can see where people have gone from. I've no idea if that made any sense. This is such a waffly video. Of course, you've got the added factor of basically, if you like a book, you probably want to go back to it. I know me personally, the reason why I reread so much is because I enjoy it. And I enjoy it for a whole host of different reasons. So I find that when I have a new book that I'm really enjoying, I have a tendency to kind of race to the end because I want to know what's happening and I want to know where the story is going to go. And I've caught myself on numerous times where actually I don't want the book to end, but I can't slow myself down, and I kind of wish I'd taken a bit more time reading it. So by rereading, you get to experience it all over again, which is wonderful. And more importantly, you get to experience it already knowing what's happened, so you don't have to race to the finish line to get those plot points. You can just chill and enjoy the ride and really enjoy the setting and the characters a bit more. Now that might just be a feature of me because I'm really impatient and I have no ability to slow down. My self-control is almost zero. Whereas if you're a bit more of a thoughtful reader potentially, who has the ability to chill out when she's reading a book and just like relax into it, then the value of rereading might not be there for you. I also really like rereading when my brain can't handle a new book. Sometimes life just gets hectic and it feels like your brain has too many tabs open and there just isn't the space to dedicate to an entire new world. Because every time you open a book, you're going into a whole crafted world. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it, like what reading actually is. It's like dead trees and symbols on them that you then look at and hallucinate vividly to get the meaning from it, and we all experience it in a very similar way but not exactly the same way, and it's all just really weird and cool. But yeah, so anyway, getting distracted by stoner philosophy thoughts, there are just times when your brain can't handle that whole new world, new stories, new plot, new white noise, a whole new thing over here. But I still want to actually do the process of reading, engage in reading, because there's something really lovely about curling up with a book on the sofa and just chilling, and there's something really lovely about sinking into a world that isn't your own, and it's a real escapism that is very necessary often when life gets hectic. But my brain can't do new, it just can't, like no room for new, and that's where rereading becomes brilliant, like absolutely brilliant. I consider so many of the books on my shelves that I reread it a lot to be like security blankets, to be comfort, sort of comforting things, to be a safe space where I can go and hide when the world gets really bad, or not even bad, when the world just gets really busy, when the world gets loud and bright and it just needs to stop for like an hour. Rereading is the sweet spot. It's perfect. It's better than it's better than rewatching movies for me personally. So for me, I definitely think that the enjoyment factor comes from that. And these books can act as kind of cornerstones of of your life. I think there's also a value to rereading books when it comes to using them as a litmus test to how you've changed. So I am finding this a bit more now as I'm getting that little bit older. I'm 25, I'm turning 26 fairly soon, and I feel like I've been around long enough that there are books that I've not read for at least a decade that I can go back and start to reread and see how I've changed. I feel like I've transitioned from that, you know, teenager now into an adult, granted a fairly young adult, but there are certain things that are occurring that I think when rereading them are going to change my interactions with this, and this is going to continue through kind of my life. And a great example of this is actually my dad is currently rereading a book that was one of his favourites when he read it 40 years ago, and he's now rereading it for the first time in his life, and he's finding it to be almost a completely different book to when he first approached it, because so much has happened in 40 years that of course it's going to be a completely different book to when he first read it. You know, the man in his 20s compared to the man who is, you know, in his, like, coming up to his 60s is going to be radically different, and it's something which is just quite interesting to consider. And with that, it's interesting to consider, when should you reread a book, because it's all very well saying like, oh, rereading is valuable, but is rereading literally having like the same 4 books on rotation, or is it revisiting books that you read 40, 30, 20 years ago? Like, how long do you leave it between rereads? I personally have never back-to-backed a book. I've never got a book, finished it, and then started it again immediately, and I don't think I ever would. For the main reason being, I would be terrified of ruining that book by overexposing myself too much. I watched the original Marvel Avengers in the cinema 3 times within the space of about a week, because I'd promised various people I was supposed to go with them, and their schedules didn't coincide, and it was fine. But I now can't rewatch that movie ever, really, because it's just, I know it, I've done it, I overexposed myself too early. And I swear we all have this with songs that you love and that you play on repeat for a month, and then you hate them with a passion that you can't comprehend, and you've turned something that was brilliant into something that is awful. And I think I'm just so petrified of doing that to a book that I love that I won't reread back to back. But if you are somebody who does, totally comment down below, because I'd love to hear your thoughts on like that whole process. But then again, I also haven't left books that length of time really, just because I haven't been on this planet long enough to feel like I can read books for that length of time. I'm only just hitting that stride. So for me, rereads really come down to, it's been about a year, give or take. I don't even know how many times I've reread some of the books on my shelves. I dread to even think. I know probably one of the ones that I've reread most consistently is Station 11, because I've reread it definitely at least once every year since rereading it about 3 years ago, and I'd push that up to maybe even once every 6 months, which is quite bad. I might need to stop with that one. I think how much you value rereading really does come down to the speed that you read, because for me, rereading a book doesn't cost me that much in terms of kind of lost time. I can read comfortably 100 pages in an hour. I'm not going to say I get everything in those 100 pages, but if I try and slow it down, I find that I don't. Like, I just become really self-conscious of the fact that I'm trying to read slowly, and then I read, like, I take in even less than if I was just reading my normal speed, because I'm actively going, read slowly, Emma, and then my brain can't think about what it's actually reading because it's thinking too much about the speed that it's reading it. Does that make any sense? I have no idea. Whereas my dad really doesn't reread very often, and he also reads very slowly, and I think the two are definitely linked. For my dad, an 150-page book can take him a month. He doesn't have the time to read, he doesn't necessarily prioritise it very much, to read slowly because of that. So if for him rereading a book is looking at taking out like an entire month's worth of reading, for me rereading a book is like 2 days. Cool, we can do that. In terms of the cost benefit analysis, I think you're going to enjoy rereading more if it literally costs you less time in terms of like possible books that you could read. Are you a slow rereader? If so, comment down below. Like, I want comments on these thoughts. I want interactions, because this is just me rambling at a camera, yelling into the void, going, I have thoughts on this topic that nobody probably really cares about, and I want you to share them with me. So share your thoughts. I'm so psyched about this. So I've talked a little bit about the benefits of reading and about enjoyment factor of rereading, but there is also the additional factor of, you know, are there some books out there that you should actually actively reread, in terms of, are they designed to be reread? It was a quote that has popped up a lot in my reading on this topic is by Vladimir Nabokov, which is basically, he has a whole book or article series on the act of reading and rereading, and just kind of how one should engage with text in general. And one of his big quotes is that one never reads, one only rereads, because his argument is that you can't get everything that you need to get from a book first time round, because the physical act of reading it and trying to place what the book is about puts a barrier between you and the artistic appreciation, and it's only second time round that you can really sink your teeth into the book as a whole, because you've done the bit of the initial experiencing it. I kind of think that links back a little bit to saying like why I enjoy rereading and why I enjoy it, because I'm not looking for that plot. And this might come down to the kind of books that you enjoy. If you enjoy very plot-driven books, rereading might be something that you like, because you get to go back and sort of catch the bits that you missed along the way. Whereas if you're somebody who likes very like character-driven, setting-driven books, actually you potentially don't blitz through a book in the same way, so you already catch everything as you're going. So I don't really know where I'm going with that thought. I mean, going back to the idea of some books that you should reread, there are so many examples of books that I think are almost designed to be reread, because there are so many nods back to the beginning, or you know, hints dropped and kind of plot twists that are referenced back to, and there are just so many like circular things within the fiction, there's a word for it and I can't think of it, blah, that you're only going to appreciate those fully on second time round. A good example of this is Catch-22, and for that one the humour within it is very cyclical. So there are recurring themes, recurring phrases, recurring jokes that pop back up time and time again, that on first time round you aren't necessarily going to get all those references back because you don't know what you're looking out for. Whereas I'm hoping second time round, because I know what the running jokes are, you can start them from the beginning and there'll be such a greater appreciation of how self-referential Catch-22 is. And I think I'm just going to find it like 20 times funnier and 20 times cleverer the second time round. Having said that, I don't want to reread it again yet, because I don't want to ruin it for me. It should have featured on my video I've already filmed. Damn it! Spoiler alert, Catch-22 is not on my list of books that I want to reread, but it should be. So it's now officially been added in an addendum here. There are other examples of a less literary nature. I mean, I've not read the Mortal Instruments series, but what I've heard from reviews is that Cassandra Clare is very good at hinting at things at the beginning that's going to come down later. J.K. Rowling is another classic. She has all these references that are all over the place that pop up again later. You know, the diary and then Horcruxes and all sorts of things. And then it's only really by going back to it second time around that you're potentially going to appreciate those. That was less relevant to actually go and reread, because we've done it to death in the world of BookTube. Don't think we could get any more out of that dried husk of a franchise. Not that they won't keep trying. I think that's really all I have to say on this topic. This was a slightly strange video to film because I'm not really going anywhere with it. I'm just sort of having general musings about the world. So I guess now I'm handing the reins over to you to keep this discussion going. Like, do you reread? What books do you reread? Do you find value in it? I'm so pleased that Goodreads has added that whole like rereading thing to its book count, because that is something that I actively do a lot of, and I have been missing doing that since starting a BookTube channel, because I feel this kind of pressure now to be reading new books so that I have new things to talk about on this channel, rather than just rereading favourites or rereading stuff that I've already talked about. So I think that's it really from me. Look out look out for part 2 and part 3. They will be coming up in the next few days or so, where you get to find out just some of the books that I think are worth a second or third or fourth or 10th, or maybe even in a few cases 20th look. Some of these I've read like a lot. Yeah, and that's about it. That's all she wrote. Have a great reading week, and I will chat to you really soon. Bye.